Hello, Dread Mechanic here, and today I would like to present you all with a tutorial on how I make AI-controlled mech arms with optional manual control. I will show you how to set them up, activate them and deactivate them. I will also show you how to make them reset back to a particular position. To start with, we'll need some rotors and hinges. For this tutorial I've used both for each section of the arm. We have one rotor and one hinge for the shoulder, and we have one rotor and one hinge for the elbow. I've also added a gun, a camera and a light, so the arm has something to shoot with, something to see with, and something to let us know the system is active. Once we're happy with the arm's design, we'll set some basic limits on the rotors and hinges for its resting position, and apply the appropriate velocity. This will make things a little easier later on. Around the other side we have all of the control systems for the arm. First of all, we have a pair of custom turret controllers to control each section of the arm. Next we have a pair of timer blocks to turn the arm on and off. And then we have an event controller to switch between the two timer blocks. To trigger the event controller we have a hollow LCD, which will also act as an indicator that the system is active. And finally we have a button to turn everything on and off. Now we'll move on to setting up the controls. First we'll look at the custom turret controllers. For the shoulder controller we'll set the azimuth to the shoulder hinge and the elevation to the shoulder rotor. This will allow the shoulder to move up and down, left and right. Next we'll assign the arm camera so it can see what it's doing. The velocity settings will depend on the position of the hinges and rotors, so we'll set these up so everything moves in the right direction. We won't add a weapon to this turret controller because we don't want it to conflict with the other one, and I will explain why in a moment. Targeting range and preferences can be set up however you like, so for now we'll set it to 50 meters and target friends so it can aim at me while we test some things. And now onto the elbow controller. For the azimuth we'll select the elbow rotor, and for the elevation we'll select the elbow hinge. Once again we'll select the arm camera so it can see and aim. We'll set the velocities as needed so all the directions are correct. And this time we'll add the gun to the selected tools. The reason we add it to the elbow controller and not to the shoulder controller is firstly to prevent conflict between the two turret controllers trying to fire the same weapon. But it also allows us to manually control the elbow section of the arm and fire the gun while the shoulder section provides a bit of aim assist. Next we'll look at our timer blocks. To create the basis of our on-off system, we will need two timers and we'll name them arm on and arm off. First we'll select arm on and go to the setup actions menu. Then we'll select both of our turret controllers and choose the enable AI on action. Then we'll select our arm light, arm camera and arm gun and choose the turn block on action. Now that we have a timer that activates our arm system, it's time to make one that deactivates it. So now we'll select the arm off timer and once again go to setup actions. Now this is where our order of commands gets a little more important. Timers perform actions in order from the first slot on page 1 to the last slot on page 10. So certain things can cancel each other out if we're not careful. The first thing we want to do is choose Enable AI Off on both of our turret controllers. This will stop them interfering with some of the actions we will choose later. Next we will choose Turn Block Off on our arm light, arm camera and arm gun. Then we'll move to page 2, select all of our arm rotors and hinges and choose Reset Velocity. This is a fail-safe in case any rotor or hinge still has velocity applied after the turret controller has been deactivated. And this is where setting up our resting position earlier on will come in handy. All we need to do is select each of our rotors and hinges and choose either increase velocity or decrease velocity depending on how we set them up. Now that our on and off switches are done, we need a way to make them into a single button. And for that we're going to use an event controller and a hollow LCD. We are using the hollow LCD because the event controller needs something to trigger it by turning on and off, and we also want a visual indicator that the system is active. LCDs are great for this, but a light would work just as well. So we'll set that up however we like, and then we'll move on to the event controller. which I have named controller arm on off. In the event menu, we will choose blocks on off switched. Then we'll choose the hollow LCD we just set up from the available blocks menu. And then we'll click on select actions. And this is how we are going to make our on and off switch. Like timers, event controllers also perform actions in order from page 1 to page 9. But they're also similar to sensors in that they have two sets of slots that activate depending on input, and we can use this to our advantage. On page 1, slot 1, we'll select our arm on timer and choose toggle block on, and in slot 2 we'll choose toggle block off. Then we'll go to page 2, slot 1, and select our arm on timer again and choose trigger now. Then on page 3, slot 1, we'll select our arm off timer and choose toggle block off. And in slot 2, we will select toggle block on. And finally, on page 4, slot 2, we will select our arm off timer and choose trigger now. So now when we turn on the hollow LCD, the event controller will turn on the arm on timer and trigger it, and turn off the arm off timer. And when we turn off the hollow LCD, it will turn off the arm on timer and turn on the arm off timer and trigger it. That might all sound a bit confusing, but it means we now have a foolproof way of activating and deactivating our ARM system without accidentally triggering both timers at once. And if we need to amend our commands at any point, it's a simple case of editing the timer sequences. As you can see, when we activate the system, everything turns on and springs into life. And when we deactivate it, it all turns off and resets back to its default position. I've set the turret controllers to target friends so we can get a feel for how the arm moves and adjust its settings accordingly. Now if we put some ammo into it, I can show you why we only set one turret controller to use the gun. If we jump into the control seat and activate our arm, it will start firing at the target. Now if we take control of the turret controller that is using the gun, it will stop firing, and it will only fire when we pull the trigger. However, if we control the other turret controller, the first one will start firing again as it pleases. If a turret controller has a weapon assigned to it, it will try and use that weapon regardless of what else might be able to use it as well. This is why I only assign the weapons to the last section of the arms. All the other sections of the arm act as a sort of aim assist, as they all attempt to target the same thing. As you can see, if I pull away from the target, the other turret controller tries to correct me and line itself back up again. And that is how to make a basic AI controlled arm with optional manual control and a basic on and off switch. Now, if we wanted our arm to reset into a different position without changing the rotor or hinge limit, we're going to need a few more things. First, we're going to need an event controller for each rotor and hinge in the arm, and another timer block. And we'll name each event controller after the rotor or hinge that it's looking at, and tag it with the word reset to make things a little bit easier. We'll select angle changed from the event menu, then set the condition and angle threshold to whatever suits our needs, and then we'll choose the rotor or hinge we want to stop from the selected blocks menu, and finally we'll click on the setup actions button, select the appropriate rotor or hinge, and choose reset velocity. If we do this for each one, we'll have a basic system to reset the arms how we want, but we need a way to make sure that they get there. And for this we need an extra timer block, and we're going to name it arm reset. First we'll click on setup actions, then we'll select all of our arm rotor and hinges and choose the reverse action. Then we'll select the arm reset timer itself and choose the start action. Then we'll go back to the control panel and give the timer a 2-second delay. This can be adjusted to whatever suits your particular design. So now if we deactivate our arm and trigger the arm reset timer, the event controllers will stop the rotors and hinges where we want them to. And if they happen to miss their target or be in the wrong position at the start of the reset cycle, the arm reset timer will move the rotors and hinges back and forth until the event controllers are triggered. And now we need to tie these blocks into our on-off system, because if we leave them active they'll start causing us problems when we use our arm. So we'll go back to our arm on and arm off timers, and this step can double as a beginner's guide to advanced timer programming. If we want to prevent multiple systems conflicting with each other, we need to turn them on and off in the right order. This is why it's always a good idea to leave the first page of a timer block blank if we want to program complicated things. It allows us some space to turn off conflicting systems before we activate the things we want. So I've moved all of the original settings to the next page in the exact same order. Now all we need to do is select all of our reset controllers and choose the toggle block off action. Then we select our arm reset timer and choose the stop action and the toggle block off action. Next we'll go over to our arm off timer and do something similar. Because we want the reset system to activate after the arm starts to turn off, we can add our commands to the end of the timer sequence. So on page 3 we'll select all of our reset controllers and choose the toggle block on action. Then we'll select our arm reset timer and choose the toggle block on and start actions. Now when we activate our arm, the reset system will turn off, and when we deactivate the arm, the reset system will turn on again. As you can see, the rotors and hinges aren't exactly on the mark, but this can be corrected by adjusting the torque settings of the rotors and hinges and tweaking the angle threshold of the reset controllers. And that is it for these subgrid shenanigans, but these ideas can be expanded into more complex systems of timers moving hinges that trigger event controllers that move more hinges that trigger more event controllers until you have systems that can do complicated things like this. See you all next time.